Hi everybody, I'm Aspiringspike. Today we are going to be talking about some more Pioneer. This is Blue-White Control. This is a deck I've been pioneering for the last couple of weeks. Basically, ever since Feldar Guardian was banned, I've been on this deck. Before, when the cat combo existed, I don't think that Blue-White Control was viable because you didn't have good interaction for the cat combo. But with Feldar Guardian banned, I have been really happy with Blue-White Control. I got 10th place on the Magic Online PTQ last weekend, and this week there is a Pioneer PTQ every single day, and I'm going to be playing a bunch of them. I'm going to be streaming a bunch of them, and right now I'm planning on playing Blue-White Control. So I'm going to go ahead and talk about the deck, run it through a league, and hopefully you guys tune in to the stream, twitch.tv/aspiringspike sometime this week, and see me jamming some more Blue-White. I do think one of the main reasons to be Blue-White over a color combination like Esper or Jeskai, even though those two color combinations have better spot removal, is your mana is way less painful. Only having to play 4 shock lands does matter a lot in a control deck where your life total is always something you need to leverage to your advantage. And because you're straight 2 colors, you get to play 4 castles. I've been really happy with the castles in Pioneer. Without fetch lands and shock lands, these cards really slot in very well to 2 color decks. You know, we've seen I think all 5 castles have seen a lot of play in Pioneer so far. And in this deck, we're choosing to play 2 of each, 2 of the white castle, 2 of the blue castle. I've been really impressed with Castle Ardvindale. One really subtle thing this does is it allows you to play an untapped land as your primary win condition. Just playing 2 Castle Ardvindales, you don't need a card like Elspeth Sun's Champion, Aetherling, Approach from the Second Sun. You don't need a card in your control deck that is a dedicated win condition, and it's hard to overstate how valuable that is, to not have a card that's dead in most situations, but is just a card that you need to actually close out the game. Being able to have that role as an untapped land at basically no cost is a really big deal. So I've been absolutely in love with Castle Ardvindale. It pressures your opponent's planeswalkers in the mirror. Really big fan. Also playing 2 Castle Vantress, another card that doesn't need too much defending. We see this card a lot in the Nexus decks. We see this card in modern Blue-White Control. A card I really like. It's very strong to hit your land drops in the mirror and against mid-range decks, just making sure you draw better cards than they do. You might think that only 1 Field of Ruin looks a little weird, and I admit that it does. Field of the Dead is a really popular card at the moment, and only having access to 1 copy I think is something you should probably raise your eyebrow at. But I have played with more Field of Ruins, and I think that playing more than 2 colorless lands is kind of just not where you want to be when you have 4 copies of Absorb. I think Absorb is a really good reason to be Blue-White Control. And I think that if you play 25 lands and 2 colorless sources, you're not going to be able to cast your Absorbs as often as you'd like to. So I think that if you wanted to play more Field of Ruins, if you could play 26 lands and play the second Field of Ruin, or you could play 25 lands and play 2 Field of Ruins, or if you wanted to even play 3, you could play 26, no Gaia Reach, 3 Field of Ruins. And I am choosing to play the Gaia Reach instead of the second Field of Ruin, because in combination with the Narset Parter Reveals, this is a really powerful lock against the mid-range ramp and control strategies, and I do think that Gaia Reach Narset lock is one of the best ways to beat the banned Field of the Dead decks. So I'm still choosing to include this. Besides these cards, nothing too special. 4 Fountain, 4 Fortress, 6 Island, 5 Plains. I'm not playing any Irrigated Farmland or any Prairie Stream, or any Temples. I think that the Temples would probably be the #1 card I would want to play if I wanted another dual land, except for the fact that they don't have the Island Plains super type. So I actually think that with 4 Fortress and 4 Castles, if you did want a 9th or a 10th dual land, they should be Irrigated Farmlands, because they have that Island Plains type. Moving on to the spells a little bit. We're playing 4 Ops. One of the best things that Opt does for this deck, besides fueling Dig Through Time, is it allows you to play 25 lands. I think that if you were not on 4 Ops, then 26 lands would be a must, but 25 lands, 4 Opt has felt good for me. something I've been a big fan of. And then the 2-drop slot is certainly the most contentious, and I think the main reason why people shy away from blue-white control is because there is a distinct lack of good early interaction for the deck. I've talked about this a little bit on stream, but I do think that if a card like Condemn, Oust, Path to Exile existed in Pioneer, blue-white control might be just too strong. So I kind of like that you have a bunch of very medium 2-mana choices. And I've liked my split of 2 Blessed Alliance, 4 Azurius Charm, 2 Syncopate. I like that these are all instants, and they go to the graveyard for Dig Through Time. I really like Azurius Charm. I know a lot of people have been critical of it on Twitter, but I think this card is by far the best 2-mana interactive spell. Putting a creature on top, really strong. It's good to put powerful creatures on top because you get them off the field. It's good to put bad creatures on top because your opponent has to draw a Mana Dork or a Bomat Courier late in the game. I really like Azurius Charm. It's also nice that in the matchups where you don't need spot removal, this card just cycles. Big fan. And the lifelink mode has come up a few times with Castle Archvindale, but very rarely. And then we're playing 2 Blessed Alliance. This is a card that I have played in Modern to some success years ago, but I do think this card is very powerful. All 3 modes are relevant, although the untap 2 creatures doesn't usually come up unless you have a Lyra in play. But I have cast Blessed Alliance on all 3 modes a few times, and for the most part, you just want this to make your opponent sacrifice an attacking creature. I think if you have 2 extra mana, you get to gain 4 life. It's hard to overstate how valuable just some incidental life gain in a control deck can be. You are always managing your life total and leveraging it against your opponent's resources, especially in a deck with Supreme Verdict, trying to hold out and get as many creatures with this as you can. I think that 8 2-mana interactive spells are... It's about the minimum. I was playing 9 for a little while, but I've added Detention Spheres to the main deck, and we'll discuss that in a little bit. I would not ever play 7. I think 8 is correct, and I think that you probably would like to find room for the 9th, but we'll discuss the Detention Sphere in a second. Playing 2 Syncopates, no Censors. I'm just really high on Syncopate in this format. I think it's just actively a card you want to be playing in your blue control decks. I've been pretty unimpressed seeing Censor on the other side of the field. I haven't chosen to include any. I think that if you want to play Censor, you need to be a way more spell-heavy version of this deck, rather than being more in on the Planeswalkers. And you probably would want Censors in combination with Syncopate rather than instead of. But I've been really happy with Syncopate. The Exile Clause is probably more relevant than you think it is. And so Detention Sphere is kind of the hot topic as well. This is a card that in my initial builds, I chose to leave this card out of my deck. This was a card, when Veil of Summer was really rampant, I really disliked that Detention Sphere got hosed by Veil of Summer really hard. It gets hit by Abrupt Decay. You can't Detention Sphere an opposing Detention Sphere, which is pretty relevant in the mirror. And if you have a Teferi like Time Raveler in play, and so does your opponent, and you draw a Detention Sphere, you're going to really want to exile your opponent's Teferi, but if you do so, you lose yours as well. So I initially chose to play no copies, but with Veil of Summer being banned and Field of the Dead being really popular, I've come back, or I guess started for the first time to think Detention Sphere is a good card to play. It's really good to exile all your opponent's zombies and then bounce Sphere with Teferi Time Raveler. That's one of the best ways to fight the Field of the Dead decks in my experience, in combination with either a Jace or a Narset or a 5-mana Teferi. That's usually how I find myself beating the banned Field of the Dead decks. So before I had 2 cast outs, no spheres. We're down to 1 cast out, 2 spheres. I could see this cast out even being a seal away at this point, although I have really liked cast out. It doesn't get Mystical Disputed, it's instant speed, it cycles, it doesn't get Abrupt Decayed. This is a card I've liked a lot. And if we see Field of the Dead being banned, I am very likely to go back to playing more cast outs. I really do like this card in the format. And then cards that don't need a ton of explanation. 4 Absorb, best 3-mana counterspell in the format in my opinion. I like it more than Disallow by a decent amount. Disallow and Sinister Sabotage are kind of the other two that are in talks. I was playing Void Shatter in other control decks for a little bit while Veil of Summer was legal because it didn't get targeted by Mystical Dispute for 1 mana, and Veil of Summer, if they cast it, they didn't get to draw a card. But when Veil of Summer was banned, I moved off of Void Shatter. Although I do think Absorb was always better than Void Shatter. It's hard to, again, that incidental life gain matters a ton in a deck like this. Teferi Time Raveler, Narset Parter Veils. This again is, what we see in modern control very often. Teferi and Narset coming down on turn 3, totally warping the game with their static abilities. Really, really powerful cards, and one of the main reasons to play a deck like this. 4 Supreme Verdicts, 4 mana Wrath that can't be countered. Again, doesn't need a lot of defending, one of the main reasons to play a deck like this. Jace Architect of Thought is something that is a card that a lot of people have asked me about, asking me if this should be a Gideon Ally of Zendikar instead. But I think that if you are raising your eyebrow, Jace, maybe you didn't play it in Standard. This card is really, really powerful. I've even played it in Modern before Jace the Mind Sculptor was unbanned in Modern, and I've liked this card a lot. It's +1, lets you play defense so well. It generates a lot of card advantage with its -2, a little mini Factor Fiction. Its ultimate is a win condition, which is relevant because we are kind of light on win conditions, although I never really find myself out of win conditions. It hasn't ever happened before that I have found myself without a way to win the game. I really like Jace. I like Jace a lot. I like my split of Planeswalkers. We'll talk about that a little bit more when we get to the section on cards I am not playing, because I think that's about as important as talking about cards I am playing. So 3 Teferi, Hero of Dominaria. My first draft had 2. I pretty quickly wanted access to the 3rd copy. This card is really, really important, especially against the Bant Field of the Dead decks. Just slamming it and holding up a counterspell is the best way to win the game, I think. I'm playing 2 Dig Through Time. Dig Through Time has actually been, it's 2 mana most of the time in this deck, and it's 2 mana way more often than I expected it to be, but with all of your 2 mana spells being instants that go to the graveyard, and your ops also fueling it, Dig Through Time has been an A+ in this deck. I really, really liked it. It's also really nice to be able to dig for Supreme Verdict on turn 6. I've been really happy with 2 Dig Through Times. I have toyed with the idea of playing a 3rd. I do think that the 3rd dig would have pretty severe diminishing returns compared to the 2nd one. If we were to play a 3rd, then we'd probably cut like a Narset for it because they do similar things, and at that point you could cut the Gaia Reach and play more Field of Ruins, and I think that would be a totally fine way to build the deck. But I've liked this split of Narset and Dig Through Time so far. I guess we'll talk a little bit about cards we're not playing, because I do think, especially in a deck like this with the card pool as big as it is, it's important to talk about cards we're not playing. So in my first draft, I had 1 copy of Elspeth Sun's Champion. That's a card that is very, very powerful. I think that it totally dominates all of your mid-range matchups. Green decks just kind of can't get through it, and it's a card I liked a lot. But I ended up cutting it for the 3rd Teferi, Hero of Dominaria. I think Elspeth is it's just not very well positioned against Blue-Red Phoenix. It's not very well positioned against the mono-black aggro decks with their Smuggler's Copters. It's not something I really like against Nexus either. It's like okay in the mirror. It's still like a 6 mana sorcery that can get answered. And also Jace, Architect of Thoughts +1 answers the tokens in the mirror. So I had it in the sideboard for a little bit, and then the matchups where it was good against, like mono black Devotion, these green mid-range decks, these are already decks that you beat up on as blue-white control. So I decided to not play any copies of Elspeth Sun's Champion, but I think as the format evolves, that's certainly one you want to have access to in your toolbox. No copies of Search for Azcanta. This is a card I get asked about a lot. I think Search for Azcanta, in the same way how modern control decks were playing Search before the War of the Spark, Planeswalkers, Teferi Time Raveler, and Narset Parter Veils got printed. Teferi and Narset are just better card advantage engines than Search for Azcanta. And also, my biggest problem with Search for Escanto, or maybe not the biggest, but a big criticism I have, is on the control mirror. If you choose to be on the draw in the control mirror, you kind of can't play Search for Escanto on turn 2, because if you do, you open yourself up to having their Teferi Time Raveler just bounce your Search for Escanto, and then you're at a huge disadvantage. And when your like 2-drop card advantage engine isn't castable really on turn 2 in the mirror, it's probably just not something you want to include in your 75. Besides that, I'm not sure if there's anything super glaring that I get asked about a lot. We were playing 1 copy of Seal Away. That's a card I liked, but we cut it for the 2nd copy of Detention Sphere. Yeah, I think that's those are the main things. Like, Sphinx's Revelation. Yes, that was the other one I wanted to touch on. Not playing any copies of Sphinx's Revelation. I think that Sphinx's Revelation is a powerful card, but it's not well positioned enough in the format where you can play 4. And I think that Sphinx's Revelation's real power in Standard came from the fact that the format was slow enough that you could play 4, and your first one could be for 2 or even 1 sometimes. And that was fine. And then eventually you'd cast 1 for 4 or 5 and you'd win the game with that. But when you can only play, 1 or 2 Sphinx's Rev in your deck, and I think that there is only room for 1 or 2, and Dig Through Time is kind of in that spot. The card is much worse in my opinion. I see people in my chat a lot, and I have, it's turn 11, I have 11 mana in play, and they say, wow, Sphinx's Rev would be insane here. And they're not wrong, but typically, if you have already survived to that point in the late game, you are advantaged as a control deck. You don't necessarily need more percentage points in that spot. I think Sphinx's Revelation is just not as good a card advantage engine in Pioneer as the Planeswalkers and Dig Through Time is. If Dig Through Time gets banned, you're very likely to see me play Sphinx's Revelation at that point, but until these broken delve spells are banned, there's really just not a lot of a reason to play other card advantage instants and sorceries. So that's the main deck, and those are the cards we aren't playing. To just very quickly talk about the sideboard, we're playing 2 Rest in Peace. This is mainly for the Blue-Red Phoenix matchup. It's a card I like a lot. It's also, comes in against other various graveyards, brews, but 2 Rest in Peace is the number I've liked. Playing 2 Lyras. This is a card you board in a lot. A card that, people board out their removal spells very often, and you just play your Baneslayer Angel and it dominates the board and they don't have a good answer to it. Also a good sideboard against mono red, which you need a density of, and I think any deck in this format. We're playing 3 Aether Gust. This is a card that's good against both mono red and mono green. And it might look a little weird to be playing 3 Aether Gust, but I think this card is exactly what the blue control deck needs. It's a 2-mana instant that is hyper-efficient interaction, and that's exactly what the blue-white control deck is lacking on. So in those matchups, if we can just increase our density of cheap interactive spells, we're going to be in good shape. Playing 2 Mystical Disputes for the control mirrors, mainly for Nexus, just various blue decks, of course. Also 1 Narset for the same matchups. Good against Nexus, good in the mirror. Really good against Blue-Red Phoenix. You play this, and then most of their spells don't function. 3 Dovin's Vetoes, also for the mirror, also for Nexus, also for Bant Ramp. And 2 Pithing Needle, and this card is actually mainly for mono black aggro. The 2 biggest problems against mono black aggro are Smuggler's Copter and Mutavault, and being able to name either of them with one mana card. Really, really powerful. I was playing some Settle the Wreckages, but I found with all their Duresses and their Thoughtseizes, it was kind of clunky to hold up a 4-mana instant. I've liked 2 Needles so far. It's also good against the Oko decks. And then, hypothetically, if someone is registering Aetherworks Marvel, you can bring it in, but that's not very likely. So, that's the deck. Those are my thoughts. With a deck like Blue-White Control, everybody has their own take. Everybody approaches matchups in different ways, and I hope that you wouldn't take my word as gospel, as absolute truth, and I hope that you would weigh your own thoughts and experiences against mine and come to your own conclusions. I can only ever impart impart my knowledge to you, and you can weigh it against your own. But that's the deck. Excited to play it in a league. Okay, so we're on the draw for round number 1. This is a really close hand. You know, 5 lands is not ideal, but we have a good 2-mana interactive spell into Ferry Time Raveler, so I am going to keep. I also, against a Island Go, I'm pretty happy to keep a land heavy hand. Although, of course, we didn't know that they were a blue deck until after we clicked keep. This is pretty likely to be the mirror, although a little too early to tell. Oh no, this is spirits. This is spirits, and I will tell you right now, I have never beaten spirits with blue-white control. I believe I'm 0-6 or 0-7. The biggest problem is they have so many good, efficient answers for your Supreme Verdicts in Selfless Spirit and Spell Queller. Their interaction, all of your 2-mana interaction is something they can play around really well with Rattle Chains and Mausoleum Wanderer, and you just don't very often have good manas for, or sorry, good answers for their interaction. It's a matchup I've really struggled in with blue-white control, and it's not a big enough part of the meta, in my opinion, to like make me want to not play blue-white control, or to make me want to adjust my 75 to beat. And you're gonna have bad matchups with any deck, and this is, in my opinion, a close to unwinnable matchup. And I'm not someone that says that very lightly. So we're going to lose to Ferry Time Raveler here. Didn't have much of a choice in that regard. So I suppose our game plan is going to be to Azurius Charm the Selfless Spirit, and then try to Supreme Verdict the Supreme Phantoms. I don't think we can't really play Jace. Jace will still die to the board, so we'll go for this Azurius Charm. This plan is very vulnerable to a Rattle Change, to a Spell Queller, to a lot of things. But if our opponent just has more goofy lords, like if that's their play, then we're going to be in decent shape. Our opponent looks like they're respecting Settle the Wreckage, or maybe just they're respecting an additional Azurius Charm by only sending with 1 Supreme Phantom. That's fine. We'll go ahead and take the hit here. Probably just cycle Azurius Charm end of turn. Well, I guess they would have attacked with... So they must be thinking about Settle the Wreckage. I think that I'd like to Supreme Verdict this turn, and then next turn Detention Sphere the Supreme Phantoms after they Selfless Spirit, and then hold up Absorb. Let me think. So I guess the big problem, of course, if our opponent's Spell Queller is us, but I don't think that we're super likely to beat a Spell Queller on Supreme Verdict either way. But I like this line. I like this line. I think our opponent's just gonna Selfless Spirit here. It does now seem that they're pausing, like they're debating the merits of using Spell Queller or Selfless Spirit. I'm a little just a little nerve-wracking, because we probably can't beat a Spell Queller if they cast it, but they decided to go with the Selfless Spirit. We'll see if they have a spell here. It's a Rattle Chains. They have 2 Rattle Chains. Okay. Now, are we actually just dead on board? 8 plus 4 from the Mutavault, 12. Yeah, we're just dead on board. Oh, man. Yeah, again, this matchup is really, really difficult. We might be going to 0-7 or 0-8 against blue-white spirits here. I do like Lyra's in the sideboard. It's something that, like, in theory, I think something you can leverage to a victory. They don't have a ton of good answers to it. They can bounce it with Ferry. That's the main thing. But they are very unlikely to have a hard answer to this post board. I do like Mystical Dispute as well. Narset is a card I don't like very much in this matchup. And then the 2-mana removal is also, like, you need a density of it, but they're just not very good. I guess we'll go -2 Azuria's Charm. Blessed Alliance at least gets around Rattle Chains. And we're going to cross our fingers and hope to get very lucky. And, you know, just like in any format, in any matchup, even if you have an unfavorable matchup, you can still get lucky and you can hit that, you know, maybe 30-40% chance to win. So on the play for game 2, you know, if this hand had, you know, the man like double white or even single white, I'd be like probably snap keeping this. It's possible that we have to draw 2 white lands in like the top 3 or 4 cards of our deck. I don't love that. Let's go ahead and go to 6. Not a very good 6. Gonna go to 5. Our opponent has kept 7. Yeesh. I'm gonna keep this. We need to put back probably the 5-drop and Island. And I think when you mold the 5, keeping the 5-drop is a little rough. I mean, this hand would have been actually pretty good if it was a 7. And as unlikely as it is that we can leverage Supreme Verdict to our advantage, it's not impossible. You know, they could just not draw Selfless Spirit or Spell Queller and really commit into the Supreme Verdict. Or now that we've drawn the second one, it's possible that they don't have Selfless Spirit, but they have Spell Queller, and we just cast a second Verdict. We're not dead in the water by any means, but you know, always tough when you hit what you believe to be your worst matchup and you mulligan to 5. It's round 1 of your YouTube video. Alright, taking 1 from the Spectral Sailor. I think we're just going to end up cycling this Azuria's Charm. We need to hit our land drops, and putting Spectral Sailor back on top doesn't seem that great since it has Flash. Ferry Time Raveler is a good one. I'm gonna jam to Ferry Time Raveler, and then if our opponent Supreme Verdicts, then it's gonna be a good. Or sorry, if our opponent's Spell Callers, then our Supreme Verdicts is gonna look pretty good. They cast Rattle Chains because they couldn't cast it in response, of course. So we're gonna plus the Teferi and cross our fingers that we hit a land next turn. I do think Teferi being in play is probably a piece of the puzzle of winning to winning this matchup. You know, a lot of their instant speed interaction is the problem, and if they and if they have access to that, you're in tough shape. Our opponent has found a Lord to kill Teferi, but if we find a Supreme Verdict, we get a 3-for-1, so that will help us undo our mulligan to 5 a little bit. We just need to hit a land here. I guess we could maybe even, if we miss this turn, which we did. If we miss this turn, we do, you know, we can cast it next turn, assuming our opponent doesn't find either Selfless Spirit or Spell Queller. Both of those are instant speed because the Rattle Chains is in play. But you know, we're not dead in the water here or anything like that. Well, we did keep 3 lands in our hand, and it's turn 6. They didn't activate their Spectral Sailor. Not loving our chances here. Not loving our chances. I've certainly won Crazier games in the past, although kind of few and far between. I do think that if we had hit our land drop like 2 turns ago, we would have been, you know, maybe okay like the turn after they killed the Ferry. We didn't. I do think like you could maybe have made an argument for casting the Detention Sphere, but with us mulliganing to 5, I think that it was better to just play to drawing the land for the Supreme Verdict and then trying to win after that. And we didn't, and that's okay. And I will see you guys for round number 2. Okay, so we're on the draw for round number 1. Our opponent has kept 7. We'll keep 7 as well. We will keep 7 as well. Castle Ardvendale could be the mirror. I think that Castle Ardvendale Go does indicate the mirror. More likely than like a mono white deck. Yeah. And I will say that this card is really, really powerful in the mirror. Something that if you have and your opponent doesn't, it's a big deal. Although our opponent is missing their 3rd land drop, so we may see just a quick a quick concession here. And yeah, with especially drawing 2 Teferis, our opponent missing a land drop, we're gonna try to resolve this. This card is really, really warping in the mirror. I'm gonna go ahead and draw a card in case our opponent goes land Detention Sphere. We don't really get punished by anything by not minusing there. Oh, never mind. We do a little bit because they are not the mirror. This is the blue-white mid-range tempo deck, whatever you want to call it. We could have bounced the clue token here. That being said, I'm just going to play Island and pass. It's possible that we end up wanting to use Supreme Verdict on our opponent's instep here. I do think that our opponent is kind of likely to just sack their clue looking for a land. Not gonna like Blessed Alliance the Thraben Inspector though, not yet. So they hit their 3rd land drop. They are gonna have to go to discard here though. Reflector Mage. Well, let's go ahead and plus to Ferry. Azurius Charm is kind of interesting. If our opponent doesn't have their 4th land drop here, then, you know, we can Azurius Charm the Thraben Inspector and guarantee that they don't hit another one. I think that it's just probably, this is probably not something we need to do. We'll just let Teferi take 1. So yeah, we can Supreme Verdict here if we want to. Imagine our opponent cracks the clue token. If they miss their land, they have to discard. They hit their land. Yeah, I guess we can Supreme Verdict now. Just clean off the field. Not a great Supreme Verdict, but our Teferi was being, you know, we needed to act if we wanted to keep our Teferi in play. And I think that acting then and being able to keep the maximum amount of mana up this turn as possible has a good amount of value. So let's go ahead and could absorb this. We don't necessarily have to. Let me just think, because we could dig through time in response. Dig through time will be cheaper down the line. Let's absorb. Just wanted to weigh options there. Opponent hit land drop number 5. Our opponent does have a lot of instant speed threats. Again, the blue-white flash matchup is also not very favored for blue-white control. We hit. This is like this deck plays in a very similar way to the blue-white spirits deck, of course. But I think that we're much better against this version, and of course our opponent has also stumbled really hard on the early turns of this game. Another Teferi. Let's dig through time in response for 4 mana. We can hit and absorb. Teferi, Hero of Dominaria is good as well. So there's a Detention Sphere, but kind of what came up in the deck tech where you have a Teferi in play, they have a Teferi in play, you have access to a Detention Sphere, but you don't want to exile your own Teferi. I guess we do take it though. So we can just minus this Teferi for no value, draw a card, and then exile theirs. an ideal use of this Teferi, but we have a backup one. Although I guess minusing here does open us up to a spell queller, but now that they've used their mana and we're not vulnerable, this is pretty clearly the play at this point. So we're actually, you know, a mana short of holding up Absorb, which is kind of a bummer, but still gonna stick to the plan. Definitely don't want to commit this to Ferry the turn before we play our Detention Sphere. Yeah, but I'm sure when I was talking about it in the deck tech, like exiling your own permanent with Detention Sphere, I'm sure that seemed like a little bit of a weird complaint, but it comes up a lot. It actually is way more relevant than I ever thought it would be, and it's probably a little more relevant than you might give me credit for. But hitting their land drops now, they have 6 cards in hand and 7 mana in play. Gideon Ally of Zendikar is certainly a good one. We'll probably end up using Teferi Time Raveler to bounce the token and Teferi Hero Dominaria to tuck the Gideon into the deck. Let's go ahead and cast an Opt here. Really nice to have this Absorb. I'll keep a Syncopate as well. I think our opponent's going to be using a lot of their mana. I bet they're holding up Spell Queller here as well. And I also bet we'll get to use Syncopate for just 2 mana. Yep, I was correct. Always important to call your shots, because when you're wrong, your opponent, the viewers will never notice, and then when you're right, you get to look smart. So we'll do the plan, and now we're super ahead on board at this point, and we have a Counterspell up. So if our opponent is trying to pick back up, we're just going to counter whatever they play. Not Selfless Spirit though. We have a Blessed Alliance that can pretty easily take care of that. I don't really want to counter a Spell Queller, but yeah, Spell Queller is fine. Spell Queller is fine. We can Jace +1 so we don't lose any of our Planeswalkers, and then we just don't need to worry too much about 1 power coming in. It's not that big a deal. Jace is also checking our opponent's Castle Ardenvales, which is pretty relevant. I don't want to loot with Gaia Reach either. Okay, so they cycle, and I believe that cycles them into their Gideon Ally of Zendikar, if I'm not mistaken. Alright, let's use Blessed Alliance. The opponent is going to tick Teferi Time Raveler's loyalty down 1. We have a Teferi in play, so we have nothing to fear, no Spell Queller or anything like that. Then I think that they're going to play their Gideon Ally of Zendikar. We're going to use our Absorb, and this is going to be close to locked up. Go to 24. We could, tuck the Selfless Spirit and just play a second Teferi, and then it would have a ton of loyalty. Why don't we minus Jace first? Because we don't need to plus this turn. Supreme Verdict's pretty good. Yeah, I'll take Supreme Verdict, and then I think I'm still gonna tuck the Selfless Spirit. Just an embarrassment of riches here. I think our opponent will concede to the backup Teferi. Who knows? Some Magic players are real warriors, and they never give up, they never surrender. But our opponent is maybe 1 or 2% to win from this point. Yeah, this is fine. I'll probably just use Supreme Verdict on this end of turn. Oh, I guess we should have done it in response to the trigger. No rush, I suppose. Maybe just Azurius Charm it. Yeah, I think I like Azurius Charming it. Just forcing our opponent to commit 5 mana seems pretty good. They can kill what's a Fairy Time Raveler if they... who are they attacking? They're attacking Jace Architect of Thought. Interesting. Well, we will protect Jace's loyalty, putting Avacyn on top. But we'll play their Smuggler's Copter and pass. We have an instant speed Supreme Verdict, so no need to fear, no need to counter the Copter. I think we could have activated a castle end of last turn. Kind of slipped my mind. I don't think I mentioned this in my deck tech, but Teferi Hero of Dominaria is also a win condition. It's one of our primary win conditions besides the Castle Argvindales. If you ultimate the Teferi and then exile your opponent's field, you can start -3 targeting Teferi Hero of Dominaria, putting it on top of your deck, and then you can continue to do that and ensure you never mill yourself out. So, really nice that a really powerful control, a very powerful control card is also a win condition. There's a lot of value in not playing a card like Approach from the Second Sons. Not playing a dedicated win con. Really like Narset here. It's going to be good with Gaia Reach to choke our opponent on their resources. Probably going to bounce Archangel Avacyn with Teferi Time Raveler. This is kind of garbage time, right? Our opponent doesn't have much of a chance. We're kind of playing EDH a little bit, where you make the play to accrue the most value in any given turn, but it just doesn't matter very much. I think that we could play this game almost blindfolded and win. And it's not a ton of joy to be had from discussing lines in situations like this. At least not for me. Alright, so opponent has one card in hand. We're going to activate Gaia Reach Sanitarium. They've already drawn a card for turn, so Narset will prevent them from drawing with the Gaia Reach Sanitarium. And they'll discard their Settle the Wreckage, which I'm sure they're kind of happy to discard. I'll discard Plains, and maybe they'll concede to this Dig Through Time. I kind of hope that they do. Opponent's happy to just be playing Magic. It's a good game, Magic the Gathering. The opponent, I guess, also could be thinking about how much time we have on the clock, but we have 18 minutes. That's plenty of time. If this game were to, if they were going to make us click through everything, we could kill them in like 3 minutes. Alright, so we have a Teferi emblem, and they concede to that. Okay. Very cool. On to game 2 against Blue-White Flash. Matchup that, again, I don't love. Don't love this matchup, but winning game 1 matters a lot. Let's bring in the Lyres for sure. I do like Mystical Dispute as well. I don't think we could really be tapping out for Narset on turn 3 very often here. I don't mind Azuria's Charm and Blessed Alliance so much. I do think I want access to one Pithing Needle. It's against the Smuggler's Copter deck. Against Smuggler's Copter and Mutavault decks, I usually like 2, but if it's just Copter as the main thing to name, I think I just want one needle. We can also name Selfless Spirit, which is going to be relevant if we have a Supreme Verdict we want to resolve. I'm going to trim one Jace. They don't have a ton of... I mean, the +1 is fine in this matchup, but it gets Spell Quellered kind of hard. And a lot of their creatures are at instant speed. This is a 4-mana sorcery speed spell. Could maybe even see trimming a Supreme Verdict in this matchup as well. Not great against Selfless Spirit, Spell Queller, and I think that they're only going to be deploying a couple of threats at a time. And why don't we trim a Blessed Alliance as well? Again, this deck is not super popular. The blue-white tempo deck. It's fine. You see it every once in a while, but it's not something I have been playing against a ton or anything like that. This hand's pretty close. It needs some help. We do have a Castle Vantress, and we have a really good early interactive spell in Mystical Dispute. I'm going to keep this hand. Our opponent has kept 7. They kept 7 last time, and I don't think their 7-card hand was was very good. I think if this was just another like island, I probably would have mulliganed this hand, but I do like the Castle Vantress being here. Don't love drawing Glacial Fortress though. Not a very good one at this point. We need spells deck. I keep a lot of 5-land hands in this deck. You know, you need to hit your land drops. It doesn't all, ideally you'd have, 3 or 4 spells in your hand, but I do think Pioneer is also a format that doesn't want you to be mulliganing nearly as aggressively as a format like Legacy or Modern. I mean, you should always be mulliganing more aggressively with the London Mull, though. Our opponent has missed their 4th land drop, which is really good for us. I don't think I want to tap out for a Supreme Verdict, though. Just pass. Certainly don't want to be looting with Gaia Reach. Spell Queller, okay. I'm not going to dispute a Spell Queller. Probably will cast the Supreme Verdict next turn and hold up Mystical Dispute. Opponent did hit their 4th land now. No play. Next turn we can Ferry with Dispute up. We can also dispute like a 3-mana Ferry that they could have. Maybe we dispute this. I think we probably should at this point. I think our life total is becoming relevant enough. Next turn we can Teferi or Dig Through Time. I'm probably going to Teferi. If it gets countered, it's going to feel Dig Through Time, and I do like that our opponent can't Spell Queller it. I guess they could, if they have a 3rd Spell Queller, they can try to kill the Teferi. Yeah, and then if this gets countered, then our Dig Through Time gets a little cheaper. Castle Archvindale. That card's really good against us, but we have our own, at least. So Dig Through Time is 5 mana. Let's go ahead and I think we probably want to upkeep it. Maybe we cast it in response to the Clue Sacrifice, just to give our opponent the least looks at another Dovin's Veto. Yeah, let's cast it in response to the Clue. We really need this to resolve. And this gives it the highest chance of resolving. Oop. Okay. Probably going to game 3 here. All these instant speed threats are certainly tough to deal with. Not out of it yet. Maybe like... I think I'm going to activate Gaia Reach at this point in the game. Ouch. Opponent discards a Deputy of Detention, which is not a card I love in this matchup. It's not great to... It's usually not great to Deputy a Planeswalker, because you get to basically reset the loyalty on the Planeswalker when you can deal with the Deputy. Now as a control deck, we have a lot of ways to deal with Deputy. So we're dead to an Avacyn. They have an Avacyn. I'm sure they'll figure out where the attack button is, so we'll pack it up and go to game 3. Again, not a matchup I love. We won game 1, got lucky to do so. And we'll try to go to game 3. I don't think that we want access to... Yeah, Supreme Verdict seems so tough against the Selfless Spirit Archangel Avacyn deck. Maybe we actually go back up the Blessed Alliance and go down a Supreme Verdict. I think 2 seems about fine. Lyra seems good in this matchup, although we saw that they still have answers to it in Deputy of Detention. We'll cross our fingers, hope to get a little lucky, I think. Gonna keep this hand. Put a mulligans to 6. I do actually like playing bad matchups on videos like this. I think it showcases a good range for the deck I'm trying to showcase, and showing weaknesses is about as important as showing strengths in my opinion. So I'm glad we're hitting spirits. I'm glad we're hitting blue-white flash. All right, let's cycle this. I'll probably maybe I'm not sure if I'm going to detention sphere this copter. Oh man, flooding out a little bit. Yeah, let's sphere it. I don't want to let them get the loot. A little awkward if they play a second copter. That's fine. Mystical Dispute's interesting. So I usually like to it depends on certain situations, but I like to let my opponent make their loot decision before they know that they are potentially going to lose their Smuggler's Copter here. They discarded a Disdainful Stroke. I mean, it didn't currently have any targets in our hand. Drawing another land there certainly does hurt. It certainly does hurt. Hopefully, you know, our opponent plays conservatively and we can Castle Vantress into some action. I'm going to let the Brazen Borrower resolve. I was going to let almost any permanent resolve here because now if we can find an answer for the Deputy of Detention, it gives our Detention Sphere a target. So any, like a Teferi Time Raveler, bounce Deputy, exile the Brazen Borrower, pretty good. All right, 2 more lands to put to the bottom. Getting a little bit flooded here. Okay, that was probably exactly what we wanted to see here. And we're very likely to be able to protect it with the Dispute. I guess they could have a Dovin's Veto. Yeah. Oof. Not sure if I would have wanted to hold up Gaia Reach this turn. I usually don't like the symmetrical effect is pretty tough, but our hand is probably worse than our opponent's hand. I do like the 3 life that Absorb is offering here. Certainly not out of it yet. Another Dovin's Veto to answer the next answer we find to Brazen Bar or to Deputy is going to be tough. I'll keep Opt underneath to Ferry Time Raveler here. If they have another Dovin's Veto, again, we're going to be in bad shape, but yeah, we want to leave up all colored mana so when we bounce the Deputy, we can cast Opt, Dispute, and Absorb. If they haven't exactly Dovin's Veto, it's going to be tough, but they do not. And then, you know, Teferi's in play, so they can't play another spell here. So we're going to bounce the Deputy. And if they Deputy Teferi, that's pretty just okay for us. Like, you know, we can reset Teferi's loyalty when we eventually deal with Deputy of Detention. It's a little trickier if they exile the Detention Sphere. Might just Mystic Dispute the Deputy because them going after the Sphere is a little tricky. We'll think about what happens after they play a spell here. It's a Teferi Hero of Dominaria. I'm just gonna Mystic Dispute that. Now if we can find another Planeswalker, oh, that was the perfect Planeswalker. Okay, cool. So I think that Castle Vantress is what has put us in the decent position we're in. I'm not going to say we're, you know, locked to win. Our opponent still has 5 cards in their hand, but I'd say that we're ahead. And I think that the bottoming 2 lands on Castle Vantress, that's what got us there. Yeah, and now we're going to Absorb because we have a Teferi Hero of Dominaria, and we want to continue to leverage that into, you know, cards. Absorb is good. I think we should probably activate Castle Vantress before we draw a card with Teferi, and then we get to untap with Teferi's ability. Don't think we want either of these. Bottom, plus both of our Teferis. Teferi's so easy to play with. You just plus them. It's always the first thing you do on turns. Drawing another absorb is good. We don't know about any card in our opponent's hand, I don't believe. We don't necessarily need to Azuri's Charm the Selfless Spirit, but we're very likely to. But like, on board, the Spirit isn't killing a Planeswalker. But I think that one absorb will be fine, especially because they can't counter back with a Teferi Time Raveler in play. Yeah, we have a Teferi Time Raveler in play. We now know our opponent probably has a Spell Queller in hand by the way they tapped 3 mana and then untapped it. In their second main phase, they're going to Petty Theft targeting Detention Sphere, and that's fine. Because if they just replay their Brazen Borrower, then we just sphere both borrowers. I don't think that this matters a ton. Yeah, I don't think they thought this out. Do not think that they thought this out. There's our Pithing Needle. Not looking insane here, but we are very ahead. Might see a shame scoop here. You see that from time to time when your opponent says "ow, lol." Yeah, we've all been there. We've all been there. Just didn't quite think out of line. A lot of respect for our opponent not shame scooping there. Something that I think you might be kind of tempted to do. Let's activate Castle Vantress, and then that will let us decide whether or not we want to counter this. We can bounce one of these with Teferi Time Raveler, but we do need to make sure we can ultimate Teferi Hero of Dominaria. Yeah, with another absorb on top. With another absorb on top, let's just absorb this Queller. I'm pretty okay if our opponent sacrifices the Selfless Spirit to fizzle the draw on Teferi Time Raveler's ability. That would be okay if they wanted to do that. Let's cast the Ops main phase because the mana is free. It's going to untap. Bottom Field of Ruin. And then we'll play a Hallowed Fountain tapped and untap Island Hallowed Fountain. Then we have Gaia Reach Teferi Ultimate next turn. We have 2 counterspells. I can't imagine they have 2 answers. Or 3 answers for Teferi here. Yeah, we'll let Selfless Spirit resolve. That's fine. This is probably fine too. Yeah, I mean, like, theoretically, if we don't find an answer here, or a way to draw a card, then they can kill our Teferi Time Raveler, but it's not really going to matter. I'm going to bottom Castle Argvindale. I know it's a win condition, but Teferi's ultimate here is our real win condition. We'll find a way to deal 20 damage at some point. Alright, there's a sphere. I do think it's worth keeping the sphere to keep Teferi Time Raveler around. But Teferi Hero of Dominaria's ultimate is going to be game over, I think. I don't know if you guys could hear Athena snoring there. Too cute. Yeah, we'll discard the Pithing Needle, and our opponent will discard as well. And then they go ahead and concede to the Teferi Ultimate. See the writing on the wall. We're 1-1. We lost 2 Blue-White Spirits, and we beat Blue-White Flash. They're similar decks, but I feel way more disadvantaged against Spirits than I do against Blue-White Flash. And I'm not sure what that says about that deck, whether you should be on Spirits or Flash. But either way, we are 1-1 going into round 3. See you there. Back for round 3. We're on the draw again. I'm going to keep this hand. Looks pretty good. Having Supreme Verdict on turn 4 matters in so many matchups. Opponent has shocked with their Watergrave. It probably means they have an opt to play. Watergrave is not the Most popular shock land in Pioneer usually means you're playing against something not super popular. They put a card on the bottom. Could be Esper Control, could be Esper Demonic Pact. Okay. Not going to cast Opt in response to Thought Erasure. I think I've touched on this a few times in videos and on stream, but I see people casting their Opts in response to discard spells more often than they should be. Usually you only want to cast an Opt in response if you are trying to hit your land, because obviously if your opponent you know, could take the Opt and this is the best card in your hand, it would only be the best card in your hand because it could find you another good card. And there are certainly spots to cast Opts in response, but we're not going to. We're not going to here. This does look like an Esper control deck. Thought Erasure is a card that I had disliked in Pioneer. I'd played it a little bit in my Sultai midrange deck, but I'd also played it when the Cat combo was around, so the format was faster, and Veil of Summer was around. And so it was really vulnerable to... Sorry. Had some phlegm in my throat. It was really vulnerable to Veil of Summer. Maybe now that those cards are out of the format, Thought Erasure is better than I'm giving it credit for. That being said, I do also tend to dislike main decking discard spells in my control decks. I think typically discard spells and counterspells don't play very well together. Discard spells are inherently tempo negative, like here we're seeing our opponent spend 2 mana to not affect the board state at all. And counterspells need you to be at least even on tempo. If you're behind on board and you're holding up a counterspell, you're typically losing. So for the most part, I like discard spells when you're trying to get ahead on board and you're trying to resolve sorcery speed threats, and I like, you know, counterspells in these control decks. It's pretty rare that there will be a time when I'll recommend, Narset's really good, where I'll recommend playing both alongside one another. Yeah, just slamming their turn 3 Planeswalker, pretty good for them. Minus, and we'll see what they hit. They hit another Thought Erasure, which is actually a pretty good hit for them here. We'll probably end up, I guess now that we've drawn a second Absorb. No, we should absorb the Thought Erasure because we want to protect our Ferry, Hero of Dominaria. Yeah. Being able to resolve a 3-mana Planeswalker on turn 3 and not have your opponent resolve one in a control mirror is a huge game. Huge game. I have found in Pioneer, and also just like standard control, game 1s of control mirrors are really weird. You know, both players have lots of removal spells that are somewhat dead in game 1, and it's kind of a crapshoot. Opponent choosing to play Drown in the Lock. This is a card that I, you know, of course, like a lot in Modern. Played a lot of that Grixis control deck in Modern with Drown in the Lock. But as long as Dig Through Time and Treasure Cruise are legal in Pioneer, I'm a little scared to play a ton of Drown in the Locks. I found like 2 is fine. 2 is fine in the Sultai midrange deck, but more than that is tough to justify. Our opponent reveals another Drown in the Lock, which is checking our Teferi, Hero of Dominaria. If we can find a Dig Through Time, that's probably our best way to get out of this situation. Gets around Narset's static ability. We'll turn off the Drown in the Lock that we know about. Besides that, we're in a tough shape, and we do have the Castle Vantress. That's something good going for us here. If they play Teferi, Hero of Dominaria into Drown in the Lock, it's gonna be pretty close to game. That's pretty dope. 2-mana counterspells play really well with Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, and I think that that's probably a good reason to be playing Drown. 2-mana counterspells play really well with Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, and I think that that's probably a good reason to be playing Drown. 2-mana counterspells play really well with Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, and I think that that's probably a good reason to be playing Drown. And Thought Erasure does make Drown in the lock better, so I see what our opponent's doing here, and I respect it. I'm going to go ahead and pack it up here. Alright, so game 2 against the Pseudo Mirror. They're playing Esper, we're playing blue-white. We're going to bring in 3 Dovin's Vetoes, we're going to bring in 2 Disputes and 1 Narset. We're going to cut the Blessed Alliances and the 4 Supreme Verdicts. It's a pretty clean cut, sideboarding here. You might ask yourself, Spike, why aren't we bringing in Pithing Needle so good against their Planeswalkers? And the answer is, you know, they have the same Planeswalkers we do, probably. If we see them playing stuff weird like Liliana Dreadhorde General, or if we see Ob Nixilis, cards that we aren't playing in game 3, we'll bring in the Pithing Needles, but for right now, we're just going to keep it simple. On the play for round 2 and the Control Mirror, I do think that there's a pretty good argument for being on the draw. I've been choosing to play on the draw in the blue-white mirror because I have found that you kind of cannot tap out for a Planeswalker on turn 3. In games 2 and 3, there are too many ways to counter your Teferi or your Narset on turn 3. And I was, when I clicked play, I was kind of just thinking this is not the blue-white mirror, will just be on the play, because I don't know it as well as I know the blue-white mirror. But thinking about it for a little bit here, I think we should have chosen to be on the draw, especially with them playing Thought Erasure. Typically discard spells are worse on the play than they are on the draw. So we should have thought about it a little more than we did. But we're in fine shape here. But I think that thinking about it more, I would have liked to click draw. Our opponent, man, this is a super tempting Mystical Dispute. Them casting Opt right now means that they don't have a land drop. If they have a land drop here, they have like 1,000 million IQ. I'm gonna go for the Dispute here. Okay. So, I mean, if your opponent, if you tank on a spell and then your opponent immediately concedes, it was probably the right decision to cast the spell. It seemed like kind of a fast concession, but I mean, we conceded it a little early in game 1, although we were super dead. And if our opponent chooses to be on the draw, I think I'm going to be, or if our opponent chooses to be on the play, I expect them to. I think we'll be happy with that. I think that with them having discard spells, which are worse on the play when you're trading 1-for-1 like that, you usually want to be, like, it's a little better when you're on the draw and you're a little more ahead on resources. And I think that with so many ways to counter a Planeswalker on turn 3, it's hard to cast one on turn 3. Our opponent did choose to be on the play, like we expected. Although we don't have an answer to a turn 3 Planeswalker. What we do have is our own turn 3 Planeswalker to tap out for if they tap out for 1, which is not exactly what you want, but it's better than what we had in game 1, which was neither a way to counter a Planeswalker on turn 3, nor our own Planeswalker to play. Cool. I'm someone that really likes to shock, even when I don't have anything up in these control mirrors. Like, your life total just barely matters at all, and shocking will make your opponent think about things that you don't have. Like, if they shock here, I would expect that they would have a 3-mana counterspell in their hand, and by them not shocking in the Godless Shrine, I feel pretty confidently that they don't. I mean, it's possible that they have a 2-mana counterspell and they're just trying to leverage that, but I know I tend to like to use my absorbs when my opponent taps out for something instead of my Dovin's Vetoes, because the two, just being 2 mana, it's easier to you know, cast multiple spells in a turn. We'll need to keep Drown in the lock in mind. I think it's safe to cycle this Azuria's Charm, but don't want to turn on their Drown for our Narset here. We're just going to play Island and pass. Typically, I don't like to make the first move in these control mirrors if I can't help it, especially when I have a Castle Vantress. One thing I really like to do is just leverage the Castle Vantress into ensuring I hit all of my land drops, and then eventually our opponent will miss a land drop, and then they'll have to make a play. And then typically if they have to act first, you're able to counter what they play and then resolve your own Planeswalker and then hold up more counterspells. Opponent is tapping blue-black here. So this could be a Field of Ruin activation, but I think they would have tapped differently. It is a Thought Erasure. I don't think... Yeah, we're not going to Dovin's Veto this. And we can't Syncopate it. So with our opponent tapping down like this, I'm pretty likely to go for Narset Parter of Veils next turn, assuming our opponent doesn't take Narset Parter of Veils with Thought Erasure. If they do take Narset, I don't want to jam the Teferi here. I think that's a good way to lose the game, getting your Teferi countered and then them untapping and playing their own Teferi. We'll probably just start to leverage Castle Vantress to our advantage. They took Dovin's Veto. It's a little surprising. Although I guess it actually makes a decent amount of sense. Let's just untap now. Yeah, now this probably means we can't cast Narset here. Because when our opponent played that tap shock Godless Shrine, they told us they had a 2-mana counterspell but not a 3-mana one, so we can't Syncopate whatever permission spell they have for 1 mana here. Also kind of tough that they have Field of Ruin for our Castle Vantress, but we'll just play a land and pass. We'll just play a land and pass, not get too creative here. Oh, I almost clicked done there. That was close. Done that a few times. As I'm sure everyone on Magic Online has, accidentally clicking OK when you needed to do something. So they know about our Syncopate. We have 1 unknown card in hand. We drew an extra island. They knew about one of these islands, and thankfully all of our arts are matching. So, it's like such a small percentage point thing, and I honestly don't put a lot of weight into it, but this is something that maybe you haven't heard if you are new to competitive Magic, but if you get a small edge if you have all lands of the same art, because if your opponent thought seizes you or duresses you and they see 2 lands of different arts, and you play they see 1 basic land of 1 art, and then you draw 1 with a different art and you play that one just kind of not thinking about it, then they get a little information about your hand. And it's such a small percentage point, and also if you know about it, then you can also just play the land they know about, so it doesn't really matter. But it's a small thing if you're really trying to maximize those percentage points. Kind of like cycle this cast out and try to find a counterspell. I think we kind of desperately need to find a counterspell or another threat to play this turn alongside Narset. Drawing Castle Ardenvale is good. This really puts the pressure on our opponent to act, to get something down. And if they take too long to resolve a threat of any kind, you know, Planeswalker, then our human tokens will be able to kill their Narsets, their Teferis. And now I'm going to shock. I actually really like shocking here. I think it's going to make our opponent think that we've drawn a 2-mana counterspell, and it's going to mess with their head a little bit. And we might see them play differently because we shocked here. And again, the 2 life, super negligible. So there's a Teferi Time Raveler. They can't really minus. I mean, if they can, but if they do, they're going to lose the Teferi to the human token. Okay, so now they needed an answer to this human token. Otherwise, their like super valuable Teferi Time Raveler is just not going to be effective. And if they use their mana to deal with this token, like that puts us up a card, and then we also get to resolve a Planeswalker here. And our opponent might still think we have a 2-mana counter because this Teferi Time Raveler just might not be worth countering because we can just make a token. Here I'm probably going to play Narset Parter of Veils, because if they counter it, we can play Teferi, and if they don't, we can just hold up. We can just hold up Castle Archvindale. I mean, it's possible they have like Veto plus Dispute, which would be really sick, or like Drown plus Dispute. They know about this Teferi, so I mean, certainly you should always take the time to resolve a Teferi Hero of Dominaria when your opponent taps out like this, but I wonder what they have to answer the Teferi, if anything. We can also opt and try to hit a Mystical Dispute of our own if they play like their own Teferi. We can't dispute a Noxious Grasp, so we'll just let that go. Got a 2-for-1. Hopefully they can't resolve anything too scary. I mean, we have our Detention Sphere to answer basically anything they could play here. I also haven't been commenting on this, but they've been missing their land drops, and that's a really big deal for us, especially when we have Castle Archvindale going. They have a spell. I guess they could be casting Dig Through Time here. This would be a good spot for them to cast the Dig Through Time. I can't imagine they're countering Opt here. Gonna bottom Castle Archvindale. Draw Field of Ruin. Untap. I do like Narset here. Let's go ahead and attack for 1. I don't think our opponent's gonna use their mana before we get to our second main phase, but it is just good sequencing to attack here, and we'll at least get value for maintaining good sequencing habits. And then play Narset. See what our opponent does. So yeah, Drown in the Lock maybe? Yes. Okay, and so here again, I think I like the Shock and Hallowed Fountain play. Could see our opponent Dig Through Time here, but they might, because we shocked in Hallowed Fountain, they might just not dig. So I think that pause there and the way they paused in response to the opt kind of just confirms, at least in my mind, that they have a Dig Through Time. So there's casting Murderous Rider. That's fine. So I think I'm not going to activate Castle Archvindale because I don't want them to resolve Dig Through Time. Let's just play Island and pass. Like, us not activating Castle Archvindale is telegraphing to our opponent, we have a counterspell for your Dig Through Time. Don't cast your Dig Through Time. I might have clicked OK. I mean, there's no way we counter opt. And we can maybe cycle into a counterspell with Azuria's Charm, but Yeah, so our opponent's not casting their dig. They've been leaving mana up for it, and they're biding their time here. Okay, we have a Field of Ruin for their vents. Oh, no. Well, the jig is up, I guess. I mean, maybe not. I mean, I'll counter the Slot Erasure, and then maybe they'll... okay. I mean, I'll counter it assuming we find a Counterspell. Right. So now they can resolve Dig Through Time. Flooding out a little bit. One of the main reasons I like to play 25 lands in 4 ops is because, you know, flooding out is a concern. Happens way less when you play 25 lands. Well, no more bluffing. We'll make a token. Kind of surprised not to see them cast the Dig Through Time now. I feel very confidently that they have it. I mean, I don't know. If they had it, they would have cast it. So maybe I've just been reading something that's not there. It's a coincidence that they've been leaving up exactly Dig Through Time mana and pausing at times when it would make sense to pause for a Dig Through Time. But I do think that it was correct for them to try to resolve it when they could have. But now it looks like they're going for it, and they've just let us draw a Counterspell. So, I mean, maybe they have a Counterspell of their own to protect it, and, you know, if so, good for them. But, like, if we had drawn a Dovin's Veto, now their Dig Through Time doesn't resolve, and I think that they really want their Dig Through Time to resolve. So it does look like they have, like, a Dovin's Veto here. Which is fine. Not a big deal. Maybe they want to hold their Dovin's Veto? Surely not. Surely they want this to resolve. Oh, it's a Drown in the lock. Okay. Yeah, so them resolving Dig Through Time, huge problem. Huge problem. I think that we, like, played around it as well as we could. We, like, bluffed mana to hold up Counterspells for this for, like, 2 or 3 turns where our opponent could have resolved it and they didn't. We drew a bunch of lands. I at least like how we've played this game. That's all that really matters. You play as well as you can. Let the cards fall where they will. Yeah, so it's a Ferry, Heure, Dominaria. Pretty likely one, I thought. We honestly don't have a ton of good recourse here. We've already used 2 of our Narsets. That would be one of, like, the best things we could draw here. I guess, like, our own Dig Through Time is what we're hoping to find, but it's very likely our opponent has a Counterspell in their hand. Like, the 2 cards I would be looking for would be Teferi, Heure, Dominaria, and a Counterspell. So we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. Dig Through Time is our best draw. We'll play this game out, but we are, like, probably around 5 or 10% to win from this point. Maybe 5 or 10 sounds about right. I'll concede to, like, a Dig Through Time here. GG's opponent. I think we played well this match, and sometimes you play well and get got, and sometimes you play poorly and you win. I'll see you guys in round 4. Okay, so we're on the play for round number 3. This is a weird hand. I like keeping this on the play I wouldn't keep this on the draw. Just being able to Ferry bounce something is good. We do have Narset plus Gaia Reach, which is nice. If we absolutely need to find a Verdict on turn 4, maybe we play Narset minus, try to find Verdict. Again, a weird hand. Okay, cool. I'm happy that we're playing against the Bant Field of the Dead deck, which is what Temple of Plenty means, because I think it's a really important an important matchup to showcase how to play against it. I think it's really important to try to counter their Elvish Reclaimers and their Hour of Promise. Oh. Okay, this is maybe I was a little too confident that we were playing against Bant Field of the Dead. This is in fact some Enchantress strategy, and we'll Teferi bounce their Starfield Mystic here, which is a card, yeah, pretty weird card. Makes enchantments cost 1 less to cast, and whenever an enchantment goes to a graveyard from play, you put a +1/+1 counter on your Starfield Mystic. I bet Narset's going to be good. I bet they have a lot of effects that draw a card. Courser of Crufix, that's a strong one. They have a Verdant Haven on top of their deck, which is a card I like a lot. One of my first ever Magic Online decks was a Arbor Elf Verdant Haven deck that played... It wasn't a good deck. It was playing Acidic Slime and Sylvan Primordial alongside Dead-Eye Navigator to like flicker, to just ramp out like an Acidic Slime, and then just flicker it over and over again to blow up all your opponent's lands. It was a lot of fun. It wasn't the most competitive. It was just something I built on Magic Online, you know, years and years ago, back when like Return to Ravnica was in Standard. Alright, so Fairy Time Reveler down. Would like to find a Supreme Verdict off of this Narset. We're going to see them play the Verdant Haven. Okay, so they put the field... It was a mistake for them to put the Verdant Haven on this Temple, because now we can Field of Ruin the Temple, get them down a mana. Yeah, I mean, as good as like field, we can field this a little later. I think that it's probably better to resolve Teferi Hero of Dominaria, and it's nice that we have an Azuria's Charm to preserve Teferi's life total a little bit. And also, Narset's static ability is going to be relevant if they go for like an Eidolon of Blossoms. I imagine they have a lot of ways to draw cards here. This matchup seems like it's probably in our favor. We're pretty likely to find a Supreme Verdict soon. We've already seen 15, 18 cards because we put 3 on bottom with Narset, so I imagine one is coming up. We have, you know, a bunch of looks with the Opt and the Azuria's Charm, Teferi's Draw. Although I guess we're probably going to put something on top here, right? All right, there's a Sigil of the Empty Throne, which isn't really that scary. You can tuck it with Teferi, and then I think that we are pretty likely to find a Supreme Verdict soon. I might even, if our opponent just sends both at Teferi, I might just... If our opponent sends both at Teferi, I might just let it take 4. If our opponent sends both at Narset, like we can't save Narset with Azuria's Charm anyways. Yeah, let's just let Teferi take 4. I know I said we could tuck this, but we have lots of answers to this, and I think that we would rather like try to cycle hit a Supreme Verdict, and now we have Detention Sphere for the Sigil at some point. Cool, so there's Supreme Verdict. We'll Supreme Verdict and then hold up Absorb. This, you know, will let our opponent probably make a couple of Angel tokens. But we can absorb any scary enchantment they play, and then we can either sphere the Angel tokens or the Sigil next turn. depending on what happens. Oh, we should have played Gaia Reach 100%. That was a mistake. With Narset in play, it would have been really good to get the Gaia Reach down this turn. And actually, if our opponent just casts their last card here, we get to absorb. We get to just Gaia Reach and ensure they never play another spell the rest of the game, and then they can never trigger Sigil of the Empty Throne. I'll keep a second Absorb. Yeah, I should have certainly played either Field of Ruin or Gaia Reach last turn. It was a mistake not to. Oh, no. Sorry, I did it again. I always have a harder time... I always feel like I have a harder time recording and talking rather than streaming and talking. Streaming, for whatever reason, comes way more naturally. I feel like my mental engine is firing at all cylinders when I'm recording and talking, and I can feel the brain power draining faster. And you know, when you're someone like me and have a limited amount of brain power in the first place, it's hard. You know, my mental RAM is being taxed. That being said, we are, you know, very ahead. We're gonna win this game, and like I said last round, sometimes you play bad and you win anyways. All right, so we're gonna activate the Gaia Reach in our opponent's upkeep. They're gonna be restricted to, you know, having one card in their hand, and we're gonna, you know, choke them out of the game basically. So we're gonna absorb any spell that they can play, and then at that point they never get to cast another spell or draw a card ever again, because we activate Gaia Reach Sanitarium in their upkeep, and they don't have a card in hand. They just go ahead and draw a discard, and then they go to their draw step and they can't draw a card because of Narset Partier Veils. So our opponent is Dunzo here. They're pausing. Maybe they are composing a message for us in chat. Maybe they're trying to understand the Gaia Reach Narset lock. Maybe they're... I don't know. Either way, we are up a game, going into game number 2. Aether Gust seems pretty good here. Just again, like I was talking about in the deck tech, you know, we are lacking on a density of cheap instant speed interaction, and this is a really good spell, or at least it's serviceable. And so just whenever it's going to be serviceable, it's a card I like to bring in. Supreme Verdict does seem good. Narset seems good. Sphere seems good. I think we probably just want to be trimming like 2 Azurius Charms. I could see bringing in Dovin's Veto. Maybe. They seem like they also have a lot of creatures, it seems. I'll probably just keep it like this. Aether Gust can also counter all of the like half of their deck, which is green spells. And I do think it is good to have access to some number of 2 mana removal spells, and the Azurius Charm does that job. I could also see bringing in Lyra, but I bet our opponent has, like, you know, 4 to 8 Banishing Light effects in their deck in games 2 and 3. So Lyra doesn't seem necessarily all that good. Also, if they can get Sigil of the Empty Throne going, I'm not sure that that's the name of the card, but if they can get it going, it can outclass a Lyra. They can get 8 Angels in play, and Lyra won't be able to defeat the other host of Angels. All right. On the draw, game 2. I'm going to keep this hand. No 2 mana play, no turn 2 play for them. A little weird. Maybe they have like a Courser of Crufix that we get to Aether Gust here. I'll Aether Gust a Verdant Haven. See if they choose to put this on top or bottom. They put it on the bottom. Absorb is kind of tempting, because like a good interactive 2-mana spell is at a premium when you have a Teferi Hero of Dominaria in your hand. And also, Absorb is a little worse when your opponent knows about it. It's a little harder to play around Aether Gust than Absorb, I think. Yeah. Yeah, we'll take this. Also, we'll have access to 2-mana spells next turn if we want to have access to 2. Or we can just, play Gaia Reach and hold up either one. Ixalan's Binding, that's fine. We can deal with that eventually. We can't cast any Narsets that we draw, but we have a few answers to this in Teferi, other Teferi, and the Detention Sphere. Put a card on top with Temple of Plenty. Eidolon of Blossoms, that's another thing. That's something I'll Aether Gust here. I imagine they're going to put this one on top. They do. So let's draw a card with Azuria's Charm, and now I think I'm pretty likely to tuck the Ixalan's Binding with Teferi because Narset's static ability will stop the Eidolon of Blossoms from triggering. And then, of course, it's also nice that Narset's Loyalty got reset. We get an extra activation, potentially. I'll take a Teferi Time Raveler. I think that's going to be good in this spot. Yeah, this matchup seems pretty heavily slanted in our favor. Nice, so 5 mana. Starfield of Nyx. Well, yeah, Teferi Time Raveler is really good against the deck with 5 mana, do nothing enchantments. So we're going to plus Teferi Hero of Dominaria before minusing Narset. Usually you want to make the decision, you want to do the action that requires no decision before you take the action that requires more decisions, so you have a more informed decision on what to take with the Narset. I hope that makes sense to you guys. Cool. So we are going to untap a couple of lands here. We don't have Gaia Reach activation and Absorb up, but it is possible our opponent plays something like an Eidolon of Blossoms that doesn't require us to counter, or like a Starfield Mystic. We just don't need to counter this, and we can activate Gaia Reach end of turn and start the lock. I don't think we just don't need to counter this either. Cool. You can cast that at instant speed next turn. With Teferi Time Raveler. Let's go ahead and cycle Azuria's Charm. Although I guess we're going to do it at sorcery speed, so they can't make use of Starfield Mystic's extra mana, and I really doubt that they would commit any extra creatures to the board pre-combat. And then we'll hold up Absorb / Cast Out, and then if they don't do anything we need to interact with, again, we'll just activate Gaia Reach end of turn. There's the Ixalan's Binding. That's one we'll absorb. Ixalan's Binding is a card I like a lot. I'm not sure how good it is in Pioneer, but it seems maybe a little underplayed. Something to think about, at least. Right, we do need to find another counterspell in an ideal world, but I think that even if we missed, we'd be okay here. Opponent might be conceding again. We saw last time there was a pause and then a concession. Okay, so no concession here. We're going plus our Teferis, usually the way you start a lot of these turns, just plus your Teferis. And then we will Jace Architect of Thought. Minus Jace. Would love to find a counterspell that'll lock up the game. Opponent's had enough, and I do not blame them. Okay, we're 2-2, and we will be back for round number 5. Won the die roll. And the 5th match of the day. This hand is really interesting. We need to hit a land in the top 2 cards of our library, and if we do, this hand's pretty good. We're, you know, above 50% to do that. I'm gonna keep it. If we mulliganing on the play, it's also hard to curve out and hit your land drops in a deck like this. So this is a super borderline hand, and it's something that I think mulliganing is pretty defensible, but if we can just get a little lucky, this hand's going to be great. I would also like pretty easily keep this on the draw, I think, since we're like really likely to hit lands for Narset by turn 3 on the draw. I'd like to hear in the comments if you guys would keep or mulligan this hand. This seems like one of the closest hands we've had all video. Okay, internet cut out there for a second. Our opponent just went Hallowed Fountain tapped, and this hand is both good and bad against Hallowed Fountain tapped. I feel like I've said hollowed and hallowed at different times in this video. Sorry if that's been obnoxious or whatever. In the control mirror where you're missing land drops, I usually just start jamming threats like this. Opponent draws a card with Azuria's Charm, so we get to resolve our Narset. So this looks like the mirror to me. Glad to not be playing against Spirits or Spirits or Blue-White Flash again. I do think that we've shown it's been a good showcasing of this deck so far. Okay, our opponent didn't have a 2-mana counterspell last turn. I think that they're pretty unlikely to have a 2-mana counterspell this turn. I'll take Azuria's Charm over Detention Sphere just because we need to hit our land drops and it at least cycles. And I will minus Teferi Time Raveler to try to hit my land drop here. Assuming this resolves, you know, they get a look at they get 2 more looks at an Azuria's Charm or sorry, like a Syncopate, but they did not find one. We are going to go to discard here. We can just discard one of these Supreme Verdicts. I do really like having Narset and Teferi's static abilities in play. They're very relevant. We'll see if our opponent can resolve something here. A Jace Architect of Thought. Quicken. So they're on the more spell-based version. I think that we just split Cast Out versus Quicken Castle Vantress. And they put the Cast Out in their hand. Okay. Would love to hit a land here. Land would be so good. Okay, so no easy decisions here. I think that we just pass. Discarding the Supreme Verdict. We're going to want to counter the Cast Out, and they have to play at sorcery speed because of Teferi. I'll Syncopate here. And then they didn't play their land first. Okay, they have an irrigated farmland. We're going to see them plus the Teferi here, of course. Missed another land drop. Let's just go ahead and plus Teferi and then Detention Sphere the Jace. And hope our opponent doesn't do anything too nasty. I mean, they have Quicken, which does kind of imply that they have access to Planar Cleansing or Hour of Revelation, whatever that card is called. And blowing up the sphere here and then our 2 Planeswalkers would be pretty nasty. But if they're just passing, which it looks like they're just passing here, we're going to be in good shape. Oh, they have a spell. They cycle a Censor, which doesn't do anything because there's a Narset in play. They could have cycled it on our turn. We missed another land drop, but we do still have Absorb up, and so instead of trying to cycle to hit my land drop, I'm just going to hold up Absorbs and be able to counter whatever they play. Cool. They pretty clearly didn't have that last turn. Pretty happy to be able to counter that. It's honestly kind of risky. Let's minus to Ferry, see if we hit a land off of that. Okay, cool. And then we can just play the planes and pass. Now that we finally hit that, this 4th land matters a lot. Now we can dig through time. Now we can opt/absorb, hit land number 5. If we missed there, and like, I would have been very tempted to cast the opt to try to hit my land drop, and then if we had missed again, I could see that being a way we lose. So I'm very glad we hit, and I think that we're very unlikely to lose from this position. So now we're going to get to stick 5 mana to Ferry and dig through time this turn, which is pretty bananas. I mean, we don't have a counterspell up, so we could still be vulnerable to something like a Planar Cleansing. And I mean, I don't exactly know how likely a Planar Cleansing is, because we've seen Planeswalkers, we've seen Cast Out, and usually you don't play the Planar Cleansing alongside those cards, but Quicken does imply like a Planar Cleansing type effect. So this is going to work out worse for our opponent than they might think, because Teferi Time Raveler's ability stops Torrential Gearhulk from being able to cast a spell. Maybe our opponent knew that, and I wouldn't be surprised if they did, and they just wanted to play their spell and pressure our Planeswalkers. But I think we're going to start off this this match with a W. Let's go ahead and take Gaia Reach Sanitarium and Absorb. I'll be pretty content tucking the Torrential Gearhulk with Azuria's Charm, I think. Maybe we should have just discarded the or cast the Verdict instead of discarding it. Doesn't really matter. I kind of like them drawing the Gearhulk too. We're in garbage time. It would be very difficult to lose this game now that we found the Absorb. They discarded Disallow. Yeah, or sorry, Dissolve. Weird to see Dissolve instead of Absorb. I've been loving Absorb, but like I said in the deck tech, everybody has their own preferences for these blue-white decks that are just a little different. So we'll be pretty happy if they just cast the Gearhulk again. No need to counter this or anything. Just a 6 mana 5/6. Not even really playable and limited. Can't quite dig through time here. Sort of just going through the motions. I'm going to plan to, Azuria's Charm this Gearhulk again, especially when, they're already choked on how much action they have with Gaia Reach. It's going to be pretty good to put this on top. Although now that they've played a second creature, and I'm kind of surprised to see Jace Vryn's Prodigy enter the fold. Why don't we see if we can dig through time into a Supreme Verdict? We did discard 2 Supreme Verdicts. We did not. I'll take Castle Ardenvale and a Cast Out. And then we can just tuck the Gearhulk and then bounce Jace with Teferi. We also have a Teferi Hero of Dominaria ultimate coming off. Really no fear here. The opponent has built their blue-white deck pretty differently than we have, which is fine. I imagine they'll concede to second Teferi. They might not want to, like our internet crashed and they could think that the clock is relevant. I tend to not play that way personally, but they of course are free to. So we'll start playing quickly because I think the only thing that really matters at this point is the clock. Yeah, at this point it's pretty certain that they're just trying to get as much time off of our clock as we can. So I will just do my best to not time out. With a Jace ultimate coming off, they might actually they probably should concede to that because then we get full information about their deck building, which has a lot of value. And I don't think that we're super likely to time out in the rest of this match. I mean, if our internet crashes again, which it's not super unlikely to not crash, maybe we'll have a problem. But I'm excited to look at my opponent's deck here. Oh, I didn't know it auto targeted the planes for me. I don't think it used to auto target, having played a bunch of Nexus of Fate in the past. Cool. So our opponent packs it up. Don't think that we're gonna get too creative here. Just gonna sideboard kind of the usual, board out the verdicts and the alliances and go to game 2. Don't think that I'm gonna board in Lyra's. We can win a game in 15 minutes. I played a really cool match with blue-white control on stream last week where I think I was playing against mono black aggro, and I won with like 15 seconds on my clock or something like that. And there was a time they had like 7 minutes on their clock and we had 4 minutes, and we played quickly enough that they actually went below us on time, and it was really close. It was a good match. I wish it had gone to its natural conclusion, but it didn't. And I'll stop rambling. I'll see you for round number 2, or game number 2 of match number 5. All right, we are on the draw in the blue-white control mirror. I will keep this hand. We're up a game. Island go. Bottom this. Again, earlier I almost always play Hallowed Fountain untapped in this matchup. It'd be pretty hard for me to play this tapped. Always get your opponent thinking about what you have when you shock. Also makes your opponent think that you're land light, which is pretty relevant by itself. Our hand is great. We have 3 more lands to play, which matters a lot, and Dovin's Veto is super important in the mirror, as I'm sure you know. Second veto. Well, the shock here is not a bluff because we do have double veto up at this point. Can't imagine our opponent will fire off this Field of Ruin unless they absolutely need the colored mana for something. Yeah, they shock as well. So they have a counter. So they have a Dovin's Veto in their hand. So do we want to... No, I don't think that we want to intentionally lose this fight and have them veto our Absorb to resolve our Teferi. It doesn't seem like where we want to be, let them activate their Narset and shut off our Teferi ability as well. So here, I think I like playing Jace, and then I imagine this gets countered, and then with us being a 2, it'd be kind of incentivize our opponent to play their own threat with a counterspell up, but they can't counter Dovin's veto, and then we can play Teferi Hero Dominaria with Dispute up and hope that they don't have another veto of their own. They put a card on top with Dissolve. Opted to not go for a threat of any kind here. I do like drawing Glacial Fortress. I'm gonna wait on the Teferi. I like waiting because if we draw one more land, we have veto plus Dispute up. Not that I think that'll be incredibly relevant. I'm gonna draw a card here. We do have enough lands in play where missing our land drops isn't the end of the world, but it's also kind of tough here. Mystic Sanctuary, that's a card I haven't really liked very much in Pioneer. You can't fetch for it, and you have to play a lot of non-islands in your deck. I'll pretty happily cast a Narset here. Won't fight too hard over it. I'm playing both Disallow and Dissolve, but we haven't seen an Absorb yet. Just gonna let this go. It would be kind of a nightmare if we vetoed that and then they had a Planeswalker they could resolve. So we know they have a Dissolve in their hand at this point. Okay, so let's wait to draw another land so we can Teferi Time Raveler with veto and Absorb up. We're really ahead on cards. Although I guess we'd have to go for it next turn if we miss a land, because we would have to go to discard. I think I'd rather offer up the Narset to the Dissolve rather than the Teferi. I think Teferi is more important to resolve here, especially when we have 7 cards in our hand. They use the Dissolve. They've already scryed a card to the top. I imagine they keep it on top, whatever it is. It's a Teferi Time Raveler, so let's use our Dovin's veto. We can counter a Teferi Hero of Dominaria with Mystic Dispute if that's the card they have. I'm a little scared here. A little scared. So I'm going to play Teferi Time Raveler. I don't think it's super likely to resolve, and yeah, they use their veto. Veto is usually something you cast like when you don't have any other counters available. Or you absolutely need something to be countered. And yeah, second Teferi, 5-mana Teferi. We'll play this one again. I don't think that we're gonna fight over this if they have another counterspell, because we have another 5-mana Teferi, and we're playing a little bit of a dance where we are trying really hard to not let them resolve a Planeswalker of their own and leverage our card advantage into an eventual win. Okay, I'm going to absorb this. And this does open us up for them to resolve something big. What is this? That's something big. That certainly qualifies. Let's Ferry tuck the Torrential Gear Hulk. So we're gonna cast Ferry first, and then try to Detention Sphere the search. The reason why I want to sphere the search is one, I think Gear Hulk is gonna be way easier to fight over in a couple of turns, rather than the 2-mana spell when we have a dispute. And it's also really dangerous to keep a Gear Hulk underneath a sphere when they can bounce the sphere or exile the sphere and get that Gear Hulk ability again. They Field of Ruin Hallowed Fountain on our upkeep, which I don't understand. Like, they didn't need to shuffle away the Gear Hulk this turn if they really didn't want to draw the Gear Hulk for whatever reason. I guess they had... Oh, no, sorry. They had scryed with their flashback Dissolve, and they knew whatever card they were drawing wasn't going to be what they needed. So we should have gotten an island to hold up Dispute. That was a mistake. But now we're sitting really pretty. We have a Castle Vantress. They've used their Field of Ruin already. Don't think that will activate the Castle Vantress. If they don't do anything, they might, you know, have a Dig Through Time to resolve in response. Okay, if we can find one more Counterspell here, we're going to be in really good shape. Okay, I was going to upkeep Castle Vantress if we hit a land there, but drawing Narset, we're very, very likely to hit off of this. So we'll take Absorb for sure, play Castle Vantress, untap 2 of these lands, pass. And then not really in any danger of timing out here. This is our opponent's last spell. It's a Jace Friend's Prodigy. I don't love countering this. Let's go ahead and activate the castle first, see if we can find a better answer, like it's a Ferry Time Raveler. Yeah, between Teferi and Narset, we will find an answer to this. The Absorb is such a high premium card here. I think that we can just not worry about this so much. Yeah, there's a Dig Through Time. So we'll find like a Teferi Time Raveler or something here to bounce this. Yeah, we'll take Teferi and a second dig. Wow, that was a really good dig. Bounce Jace, untap lands here. There aren't even good spells in our opponent's graveyard for them to flash back, and they can't activate Jace on their turn because we have a Narset in play. I think we can just ignore it for the most part. Would love to find the Gaia Reach off this Dig Through Time. We'll take just the 2 spells. No, I'll take Glacial Fortress over Azuria's Charm. I think we don't mind having more lands. We can also tuck this Jace, but I don't really see a reason to. Let's just get this to ultimate. They don't have like anything in their graveyard that we are scared of. It's all counter spells. I mean, they can't even draw a card with Azuria's Charm because of Narset. We'll see if they tap the Jace on their turn, forgetting about Narset's static ability. They do not. Yeah, the Jace Friend's Prodigy looks really weird in their deck. I don't really understand what it's doing here. Alright, I will keep both of these. Syncopate, even at this point in the game, is something I think that you want. And the good thing about the... I guess the Detention Sphere doesn't get the Jace this turn, but it just is a spell that we can play without having to go to discard. Although I suppose we are just going to have to discard a Syncopate. I'm playing quickly because of our clock, but I was thinking that we could play the Detention Sphere and then we wouldn't have to discard a card this turn. not really going to matter. I could see maybe Syncopate being better than Dispute at this point. I won't say that we're quite in garbage time yet. I think that we're still certainly playing this match. Okay, opponent's casting Dig Through Time. Can we Syncopate this? I would like to have it exiled because of the Jace Telepath Unbound. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So we have 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. They have one card in their hand. We'll see what it is. Syncopate for 12. They're trying to do something in response. Did I miscount? Do they have 12 mana? No, they have 11. This is a Syncopate for 12. Yeah, the exile pretty relevant because they could just flash it back with Jace. No, I don't think that surely their last card is not also some crazy must be answered card. We do only have 15 cards in our library. We haven't seen a White Castle yet, but we're not in danger of decking ourselves because we have Teferi Hero of Dominaria to prevent ourselves from decking. Talked about that interaction a little bit earlier in the video. And we still have one more Teferi Time Raveler in the deck. So I think that we can just ultimate this immediately when we get the option. There's no fear of them countering it with Teferi Time Raveler in play. We'll keep a Castle Ardvendale to actually, reduce our opponent's life total to 0. And I suppose we actually activate it main phase because we can untap it with Teferi and get 2 humans a turn. Double the clock. Can also ultimate Jace next turn. But our opponent has something fun to get. They're playing a pretty different version. Go ahead and use an absorb here. And I think our opponent's going to concede. Like they're down a game. Like we have 7 minutes on our clock. I don't see a lot of purpose in them not conceding, but we'll see. I guess we should have ultimated. Yeah, we should have ultimated our Teferi first. I think I'm actually not going to take anything from my deck. Alright, so probably just take Gear Hulk because it's a clock. Yeah, their build's a little weird. Their build's a little weird for sure. Yeah, we should have ultimated this Teferi so we could have just cast our other Teferi. It's not really gonna matter. We have another Teferi in the deck, so we won't we will not deck ourselves. We are fine here. Let's go ahead and attack for 2. So this is their Sphinx's Revelation, I guess. It's kind of funny that this is just gain 12 life, but this dispute is not doing anything else. So we will counter this because with the Narset static ability in play, they actually don't get to draw any cards, which is another. I don't think I talked about that in the deck tech, but that's another reason to shy away from Sphinx's Revelation in your control decks. Cool. So we went 3-2. We lost to Blue-White Spirits. We beat Blue-White Flash. Oh, what did we lose to in round 3? Oh, Esper Control. And then we beat green-white enchantments, and we beat the Mirror in round number 5. So again, this is a deck I've been liking a lot. I've been having a lot of success with it in Pioneer lately. Sorry for missing last week's video. I've been trying to do one video a week, but it is pretty time consuming to do these, and while I do have a goal to put one out a week, I might not hit that goal every time. So if you want to see more Magic content, you can follow me on Twitch, twitch.tv/Aspiringspike. I play every weekday, about 8:30 a.m. to about 1:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. You can also follow me on Twitter, where I post a lot of brews and thoughts on Magic. And there'll be a link to that in the description. Do appreciate you guys tuning in. I hope you learned something, and I will see you next time. I've been Aspiringspike.